Hi, and welcome back to Football Made Simple. Barcelona may be out of the Champions League, but this match still gave us an opportunity to examine the tactical minds of Nagelsmann and Xavi. The game finished 3-0 to Bayern Munich thanks to Mane, Choupo-Moting and Benjamin Pavard. The XG showed it was a deserved win for Bayern, but what tactics did both managers use? Let's take a condensed look. And guys, if you're into fantasy football, join me this weekend on Spitch, which is my fantasy football app of choice that you can download for free through the link in the description. Speaking of choice, Spitch gives you plenty, because you can play a weekly mode, where scores reset every week, meaning a new winner every week, or even better, their season mode, where you accumulate points throughout the season. And Spitch offers cash prizes to the highest performers on the platform. The best part is it's not just about goals and assists, but things like tackles, interceptions, and plain passes count, making it much more tactical. So join me on Spitch through the link in the description below. We'll first look at Bayern in possession and why they were able to tear through Barcelona. When Bayern were building from the goal kick, they generally dropped Upamecano and De Ligt alongside Ulreich, whilst Kimmich would come into the defensive midfield position. And it was evident from early on that Barca were desperate for the win and they were looking to press high for the most part, with Pedri often joining Lewandowski so that both of these men were ready to press the centre-backs if Ulreich did go short. This was backed up by a midfielder, usually either Busquets or De Jong, who would sit on Kimmich. So Dembele could easily pick up his man, but Pedri had come from the left into a more central region, so the obvious problem was that Mazraoui would potentially be free. But again, Barca were being highly aggressive, so Balde would often push up looking to cover Mazraoui, meaning that Gnabry could potentially be in this space. And how Barcelona looked to adapt to this was by shifting to more of a back three. So here we see De Ligt and Upamecano ready to receive from the goalkeeper. And as discussed, Pedri has come in off the left hand side to join Lewandowski, whilst in this case it is Busquets who is ready to press the deepest man in Kimmich, whilst Dembele can cover Alphonso Davies. At the same time, out on the left, we see that Balde has had to push up from deep in order to cover Mazraoui. So, if Bayern did try and play short, Barcelona could be much more successful, as they were in great positions to look to press and stop any short passes. But Nagelsmann had already identified an opportunity, as Alonso, when shifting out to the left, is still not a natural centre-back. So, they spotted the opportunity to look to find Gnabry with long balls either from Ulreich or from Upamecano. And now Barcelona would be in quite a vulnerable position, because shifted to this back three meant that they were often in man-to-man situations, with Bellerin on Mane, Alonso on Gnabry, leaving Choupo-Moting on Koundé. Additionally, one thing Bayern did extremely well, by having just Kimmich deep, they had plenty of men around the ball who could win any knockdowns, and then the man-to-man situations could be exploited even more. So, as a reminder, Balde is high on Mazraoui, so Ulreich looks to go long. Gnabry is isolated against Alonso, and as we can see, Musiala is looking to join the region for the second ball alongside Choupo-Moting. And because Alonso is not the best in the air, Gnabry actually wins the ball and gets it to Choupo-Moting. And these Bayern patterns from deep actually lead to the first two goals. So once again we're seeing familiar patterns with Lewandowski and Pedri on the centre-backs, whilst this time it's De Jong who's looking to pick up Kimmich. And as we can see, Balde has been aggressive, looking to track Mazraoui. This time it's Upamecano who's gone long, but to Choupo-Moting who's dropping, whilst Gnabry, Musiala are already looking to win the second ball. It's actually a Barca man who gets to the ball first, but again, as discussed, they have plenty of numbers around the ball, so they win the second ball, and Gnabry is able to receive. And here we see the problems with Barca's back three, as Koundé is still out of position, having been on Choupo-Moting, and Bellerin is isolated against Mane, whilst Alonso has to go towards the ball where Gnabry is. So there's a massive gap in the centre of the defence, and we can see a 1 versus 1, and Gnabry able to play the ball through the space vacated by Koundé. Mane gets on the end of it and produces an outstanding finish. And it's more of the same from this free kick. Pedri ready to be on Upamecano, Lewandowski on De Ligt, and De Jong looking to pick up Kimmich. Balde is high on Mazraoui, and we can see that De Jong has come in on Gnabry as he has rotated with Musiala. So again, Barca win the first ball, but Bayern are ready to collapse to try and cause pressure to win the second ball. And now when Bayern do win it, we can see it's still man-to-man situations in the defensive regions. So Musiala, who had rotated wide to the right, now receives the ball, and Gnabry from the Musiala position can then burst past his midfield men to get on the end of it. And now, because Alonso had been man-to-man with his man, Gnabry's run means it's a 3 versus 2. And he can play in Choupo-Moting, who also finishes well. And in open play, Bayern's shape could look similar, something like this. And what was interesting is that Nagelsmann continues to persist with using Kimmich as the sole pivot as much as he can. And particularly in a match like this, that was very useful because it allowed Goretzka and Musiala much higher, thus allowing them not only to be found between the lines by direct passes, but also for knockdowns from Choupo-Moting. And even in open play, Barcelona was still looking to press extremely high, with a man almost always looking to track Kimmich, whilst the others were man-to-man with the men higher up. Bayern's shape could still be flexible, as if they were looking to go short, Goretzka could drop in alongside Kimmich. And if that wasn't an option, they could still shift to a more traditional midfield 3. But again, Nagelsmann showed that there's different ways to beat the press and you don't always have to play through it. And instead they opted to go over it most of the time by having a target man like Choupo-Moting present with men to receive the second ball, or alternatively having quick runners like Mane and Gnabry who could often make out to in runs to receive the more direct pass over the top. So if that was Bayern's main strategy, what did Barcelona look to do? Well, the name of the game for Xavi was looking to cause central overloads. And one way he did this was not just by playing with the 3, but instead shifting to a midfield box, primarily dictated by Pedri coming in from the left-hand side and Kessié pushing up on the right, allowing the extremely press-resistant duo of De Jong and Busquets to operate in the deeper regions. And here we see that fluid midfield box of Barcelona's. And Nagelsmann was aware of the central overload, so instead looked to defend in a 4-2-3-1 for the most part, with the man in attacking midfield always looking to cover the ball side pivot. But this is still 4 versus 3 down. But there was one key problem for Barcelona that gave Nagelsmann the advantage. With Pedri having come infield, it meant that there was no width high up on the left. So, hypothetically, if Balde had moved wide, and Pedri had maintained this region generally in the half space, it would often have forced Mazraoui to choose between picking up Balde or coming in narrow. And if he did come in narrow, Gnabry would probably have to track Balde into the deeper areas, allowing Barcelona to still exploit this 4 versus 3. But instead, Balde was not really that aggressive, often keeping these positions deeper on the left-hand side. So, Gnabry could still remain higher to begin with. Not only that, this would then give him the scope to tuck into the midfield. And because Balde was deeper, if the ball did come to him, Gnabry could easily then spring out to press him, or even if he now pushed higher in these situations, because Gnabry was on De Jong and Kimmich could drop onto Pedri, it would allow Mazraoui to be much more aggressive and push up and cover the left back, knowing that nobody was in the half space. This was also helped by the fact that if Pedri was pushing high, Pedri's not really a physical match for Upamecano, so he would have been able to cover any balls in behind or that sort of thing. So here we see the situation, with Balde operating much deeper, meaning that Mazraoui can push up from right back onto him. This means that now, in the midfield, there is basically man-to-man situations as Gnabry is ready to track De Jong. So it becomes something like a 4 versus 4. But in the second half we did see a bit more adaptation from Xavi, especially in his use of De Jong, who is now much more willing to drop deep, either between the centre-backs or off to the left-hand side. When he received, this positioning could still draw Gnabry towards him, whilst now allowing Balde to receive and operate higher up the pitch and potentially combine with Pedri. The difference in Balde's involvement shows, as in the first half he only had 17 touches in the opposition half, and in the second half that went up to 27. So here we see De Jong operating higher up, meaning that when Pedri is in the half space, he's drawing multiple men towards him, creating a 1 versus 1 in a more dangerous position. And even higher up, we saw adaptations in the shape from Xavi, as it went from this, with Dembele primarily providing the width on the right, and less width in general coming down the left-hand side. But in the second half, he switched to more of a diamond, but crucially, now he was willing to commit both of his fullbacks to provide the width, although Bayern could at times invert into the midfield. But either way, the goal of the shape, both in the first half and second half, was to overload the centre. And, of course, this would generally draw in the opposition defence and midfield as they look to cover. This would naturally open up switches towards both wide regions. And Dembele could receive and is excellent in 1v1s in general. However, Davis is extremely quick, so difficult to get past even for Dembele. On the other hand, when Balde received 1v1s, he's much less of a threat in these situations, but we still saw plays where he was able to combine with his teammates to get into good crossing positions. So in the second half, we saw Xavi willing to build with just the centre-backs, whilst both of the full-backs could push higher up in order to provide the width, whilst still keeping that midfield four. And we still see the goal of the central overloads in the first half, as it now means that the general Bayern defensive shape is quite narrow, and as a result, Balde is in space out wide. So whenever Barcelona were able to find the switches, he could then potentially get into 1v1 situations. Overall, it ends as a disappointing Champions League campaign for Barcelona, who despite being in the toughest group, would have hoped for better. Bayern on the other hand march on, but are still not at their very best. For the managerial tactical scores, Xavi earns a 6, not doing anything particularly badly and showing good adaptations in the second half. But he was up against a great manager in Nagelsmann, who earns an 8. But what did you think?
I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, you might enjoy the content available on my Patreon. Not only does Patreon help to support the continued production of content, as I am a one-man team, but it also gives you early access to videos that will come on the channel. You'll also get exclusive videos, get to vote on polls, and so much more. And it's cheaper than ever, no longer having a tier system, so everyone on the Patreon gets access to all the content. So head over to patreon.com/footballmadesimple to check it out.
And a special thanks to all my patrons, including Justin Robinson, Per Sandstrom, and Moez Bendabi. But that's all for today, and remember, keep it simple.